It's FIFA fixture date time. U.S. men's national team, Mexico, Canada. Today we'll focus on the U.S. men's national team and some news that came out in The Athletic. I believe it was Paul Tenorio who came out with a story about the communication or lack thereof of the coaching staff and the players on the U.S. men's national team. So The Athletic was part of the New York Times, did this story talking to Jesus Perez, one of the assistant coaches, and some other figureheads within that coaching staff about their approach to communication, to how they go about doing things and staying in touch, not only with the player, but with the player's club team, and if it's important or not important. Now, about more than a month ago, before the last call up, the September call ups, it was your boy on Football Americas that interviewed Giovanni Reyna and Joe Scally. I asked them both if they had heard anything from the U.S. men's national team, whether Mauricio Pochettino, one of the coaches, in terms of not being called up. And they both kind of looked over at each other and said, no, we've not heard anything. Now, before we jump to conclusions, let me give you a little insight on if that is normal or not normal. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the process of three national team coaches. Bruce Arena called me in, I believe 2005. Couldn't go. We were in MLS Cup, but that was my brush of U.S. men's national team coach and communication. No communication there. It was simple as you're called in. I couldn't go because MLS Cup. They spoke to the club team, whatever. Some other players, I'm sure, got to go instead. It was a game against Scotland in Europe, if I recall correctly. And the boat sailed, or that ship is sailed. 2006 comes about, World Cup, and I'm not on that team. I was 21 years old at the time. I believe one of the players that went to that camp instead of me, Chris Rolfe, actually became an alternate for the World Cup. So because of the camp that I didn't go to, because I was in MLS Cup, he ended up going, and he was a pretty good baller. He was honestly very underrated player. He made an impression on the team and on Bruce Arena, and he goes as an alternate to the World Cup. Well, he didn't go to the World Cup, but he was an alternate, so he got his foot in the door. And that's just the way it is sometimes. Then we go to the next, Bob Bradley. The communication with Bob Bradley. There was no communication in the World Cup cycle. I played 2007 Copa America, did my knee, and from the date I did my knee until about, I don't know, the 6 months before the World Cup where I blew up in Puebla and I was the Golden Boot in Mexico, there was no communication. No checking in on me, no seeing how you were, whether his coaching staff or himself with the Colorado Rapids at the time or myself. It was non-existent. I believe the only thing I had exposure with the U.S. men's national team is because I was part of the program. I used the doctor, Bert Mendelbaum, to reconstruct my ACL, cadaver. So your boy's got a cadaver ligament in his right knee. So there was no communication. I'm on this ridiculous goal scoring run on a tear where, I'd come on the field regardless of what minute and I'm scoring goals with Puebla. And I get myself on the radar, but never once was there a phone call or an email um, checking in, how you doing, we're tracking your progress type of deal. I make it to the 30-man camp. I believe it was 30 to 35-man camp in Princeton, New Jersey for the 2010 World Cup. My first taste of, hey, you're here, you're on the national team. And from there, the coaching staff was more than kind. They would tell you this is what we're looking for. This is the way we're going to play. It wasn't more like direct to me, but the team was very clear ideas on what we're going to do and what that camp was about. And I was very fortunate to make it to the World Cup in 2010. And when we're at the World Cup, you would have personalized talks with Jesse Marsh or Mike Sorber. some of the U.S. men's national team coaches for Bob Bradley. Maybe not personally with Bob Bradley, but they would cater clips they would want you to see. They would bring a USB and plug it into your laptop and say, "Hey, focus on these things. This is the next opponent, and these are the type of movements, type of actions we think could impact the game if you're on." So it was very clear communication once you were there. World Cup 2010 ends. I'm part of a U.S. men's national team tour. It was 2 games, one of them in New York against Brazil. Neymar's first game with Brazil. He ends up scoring against the U.S. men's national team. It was a game at MetLife. I remember very closely. And after that, I'm done with the U.S. men's national team. And it's quite some time that I'm not appearing in call-ups. Your boy goes on another run again in Mexico, scoring goals while I'm at Tecos, and I'm in Los Angeles, which was where my home base was at the time. And I'm hanging out at the Galaxy game in then Home Depot in Carson, and it's Bob Bradley, Jesse Marsh, Mike Sorber, the coaching staff behind me at the game versus the Philadelphia Union, at the stadium, and they're asking me, when I ended my season. I'm like, "Well, I just ended it like literally this past weekend," and they look at me like, "Are you staying in shape?" And Gold Cup's right around the corner. It's around almost summertime, and I look at them. I'm like, "Should I be staying in shape?" And they kind of look at each other and they say, "Yeah, you should stay in shape." So then, them helping me cater a fitness routine with Athletes Performance, I'm sure they changed the name now, that's in that stadium. On my vacation, I'm doing fitness. I'm staying in shape. I'm working out because I have the idea or the illusion that I'm being called up to the Gold Cup for 2011. The day before the roster comes out, I get a phone call from Bob Bradley, excuse me. And Bob tells me that he appreciates my time and he wants to personally let me know that they decided to go with Chris Wondolowski for that Gold Cup. Uh, I'm a little upset, obviously, because my vacation time was spent working out under the idea or illusion that I would be part of this team. Life goes on. That was the communication. That 2011 team ended up playing the final against Mexico. Ridiculous game. The U.S. is up 2-0 at halftime. Michael Bradley goal. I think Freddie Adu had a very good Gold Cup. And Mexico comes back and scores 4 unanswered. One of those goals, the Giovanni Dos Santos, firmala, Gio, firmala, firmala, Perro Bermudez call, where he chips Tim Howard and Erica Lehigh. Or Lachey. I think it's Lehigh. I have no idea how he chipped him on the line, but it was a ridiculous goal, epic moment in this rivalry that I missed out on. And then no communication for the next, I don't know. I want to say year and a half, 2 years. Jurgen Klinsmann takes over, and I think Jurgen texted me once. Hey, we see what you're doing with Santos. Keep it up. We'll be in touch. I didn't respond. Didn't know how to respond, kind of deal. Because I just felt it's like if my performances will do the talking. And sure enough, I get called in. And under Jurgen, I started like 13, 14 straight games. And it's one of those things where you build the trust. But the communication is pretty much non-existent with these coaches. So when you hear lack of communication, most players, mortals, don't have that direct communication with the player that maybe some of the previous players, the Landon Donovans, maybe the Clint Dempseys or the Tim Howards or the Christian Pulisic's, Weston McKinney's, Tyler Adams were used to with, well, Greg Berhalter. And leads me to the remarks in this that I thought were very, very interesting. The previous regime was based on a small group of players. They thought that the more together they were, the better they will get. We felt like we didn't agree with that. And we wanted to provide the same level of care to everyone in terms of tracking, analysis, and visiting. This is Jesus Perez, an assistant coach, on how Pochettino and his team evaluate the U.S. men's national team pool. That's interesting to me. And I'm not necessarily against it, to be quite honest. I think we've blown the lack of communication a little bit out of proportion. I think it's normal for 99% of the pool not to have that communication. I think it's normal for coaches to have direct communication with the clubs. Yeah, maybe not with the player themselves. I think it's normal for this regime to want to clean slate with the players. Greg Berhalter did a lot of good. I'm not going to shit on Greg Berhalter. I think he did a lot of good for the program in a time of uncertainty and need. Um, he came in and I want to say nurtured these kids because that's what they were in a way that I think probably few could have. I wasn't a big fan of Greg Berhalter and a lot of things he did, but it wasn't an easy task to take kids who had never played with the national team and let them feel like it was theirs. And maybe that's a problem now looking at it because you could say, well, this is telling you that some of these players felt untouchable or entitled. I don't know if that's the case. I do think it's great that everybody gets a fresh slate. Uh, I do hope and wish that there is context to that fresh slate in terms of opportunity, but you also take into account of what this program has done and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of good things were done, and we just want you to right the ship with a lot of these good players that have equity within this team. Now, nobody's asking for you to, you know, throw everything out and say this wasn't good enough because I think a lot of us would say, okay, it probably wasn't good enough, but because we know it could be better, because we've seen some of these players and we've seen the ceilings. We just want that to be better. So it's interesting that they have these thoughts. I guess what I'm trying to say here is I'm just hoping they know of that. I'm hoping they know of the finals that were won. I'm hoping they know of who had good performances and whose weaknesses were what back then and who had strong things about their game back then. I'm hoping they're just not seeing the players now and taking it at face value. I'm hoping they can see beyond that and realize there's a little bit of water under that bridge and then assess the situation. But I don't make a big deal of the lack of communication. I make more of a bigger deal of them accessing this pool and thinking the players can't run the show, which I agree. But there has to be give and take. There has to be the ability to access the past and say we can be better this way and everything that happened in the past can set you up for where you want to be in the future. I'm all for new faces in the US men's national team. You're talking to a guy who played 0 minutes, zero camps, zero appearances in the lead up to the 2010 World Cup cycle. But you're also talking to a guy who did pretty much all of the 2014 cycle and missed out on injury. And Jurgen Klinsmann, with me being 10, 11, 12 months of no participation or communication with the US men's national team, still felt the need to call me and tell me he appreciated everything I did in the lead up to that World Cup and getting the US, helping get the US into that World Cup and feeling the need to say thank you. There 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 needs to be context to everything. There needs to be the ability to access the past in a way to move forward in the future. And I'm hoping that doesn't get lost upon Mauricio Pochettino and this coaching staff and also the players. And also the players. There are a lot of players who got the benefit of the doubt with Greg Berhalter who are now realizing that that may not be the case for most of the national team pool and you need to get your shit together. So I'm hoping that's the case here.